welcome to Postcard and to Leigh G. Banks. And it's been a busy week, Leigh. It's getting busier. We thought when Brexit was over, we'd have a big sigh and a relax. And blow me, the news media, I firmly believe this, of course, invented the coronavirus. And it goes on.
And you can watch it on 5G.
No, don't go there. I'll tell you what, we could go there actually very quickly because Mr. David Icke has been in real trouble, hasn't he? He has,
yeah. And I know David Icke from years ago, and he's quite a pleasant bloke, really. And he cornered the market in conspiracy theories because he wasn't doing badly as a mainstream journalist, but he wasn't doing brilliantly. And he came up with these conspiracy theories. And I didn't really believe that he believed them, but now I do believe that he believed them. Yeah, honestly, yeah. I don't think he's doing himself any favours at the moment.
No, I mean, we both know the man. He's in our next village, actually, on the Isle of Wight, and we have met. And he's a nice bloke, but my goodness me, the danger is, as we both know, Leigh, you can talk 80-90% truth, but it's the other 10% that's the damaging, isn't it?
It is, and it's I'm not one really who goes for conspiracy theories. I like factual things, and conspiracy theories are lovely to talk about, have a laugh about, like aliens and spacecraft and UFOs and everything. But in a strange way, we've entered this dystopian world of drama and film. It's like a horror film. And all of a sudden, I just think these conspiracy theories are bad taste, really bad taste. We're basically fighting for people's lives at the moment. And I tried to get into a conspiracy theory yesterday. I think I was just a bit bored in lockdown. And I thought, well, really, when you think we have a disease which has hit this earth, has hit this world, and it's quite a painful one. It kills people just like the flu does, just like the other ones that have hit us. But why is the world closed down? Why has the world closed down? And the thing is, I couldn't come up with a conspiracy theory for that. I think the world's closed down because it had to.
Well, we are both very adamant about free speech. Does it matter that our friend David has been effectively shut up, hasn't he? That's not free speech. The BBC moaned about it, then Ofcom got involved, and he's been taken down.
Well, yeah, he's, in a way, it's like I say, at this moment, in the world's history, do you really want somebody who admits that he's eccentric, somebody who admits that he looks for the bizarreness of situations, somebody who comes up with evidence? There's a lot of stuff we're going to talk about tonight. I want to talk about the evidence of these presentations, but who comes up with these bizarre statements. Do we want that kind of thing at this moment? No, we don't. What we want to do is analyse what really is happening in the world and what everybody can do about it.
Yes, indeed. But allied to this, of course, is the stuff that's coming out of China. And people are saying, look, that's fake news on the deaths alone. I think we may have mentioned it last week. 3,500 urns being delivered over a month's period to Wuhan. The true figures are 40-odd thousand, not 3,000 and 4,000 they're quoting. Who do you believe?
Well, you've got, again, it's one of those situations. China is a communist country. Communism has never lent towards really the truth. I'm living in a form of communist country now, and only now, after 50 years of freedom from communist rule, is the news media starting to be accepted. People don't believe what the communist states used to tell them or do tell them. There is the fact that, yes, China's tried to protect itself, its reputation, but it sounds terrible. Do you trust a communist?
Well, there you go. I tell you what, that brings us on to Turkey and their prime minister, because he's shutting up doctors that are coming out with truths, just like China. My goodness me, it's going on all over the place.
Of course it is. It's going on in Britain. Our doctors here, our medics here, NHS staff were told to keep their mouths shut about what's going on. Now, if we're in a crisis, is that actually wrong? The people who have information which can be misconstrued, and don't forget, this isn't like the war years where you get the odd pamphlet coming out and then the real media would pick it up and expand on it and put it right. You have social media which will jump on anything anybody says and just put that out as true. So the NHS really is protecting the people, I believe. I'm not saying it's a good thing. It's always been my job to, if I'm told as a journalist that that person has been told not to speak to the press, then I go and speak to them. And I try to get out of them as much as I can. That's the job. That is why we are a cornerstone of democracy.
Well, indeed.
Sorry?
Indeed, Leigh, but don't forget what's happening. I'll give you an illustration. In the dear old BBC gets on people to explain a tragic event, like the number of bus drivers that got this thing and died, and the tragedy that's going on in practically every hospital when they are selecting who's going to live and who's going to die. And we've not got enough suits anyway. But you get spokesmen invited on by the BBC, and behind the scenes, they're from the BMA, and that's a trade union as strong as ASLEF, but they're not even-handed. In fact, the statements they come out with, they start off by saying, this government has let us down. Now, if they were even-handedly, they'd say, the government has let us down, but this government, they're clearly political.
It's I take your point. I can't argue against that point. Yeah, it's again, it is quite shameful that people are actually using this situation still to make political gain. Like the train drivers union boss who said that he'd have a party if Boris died of coronavirus and things like that. Why are people allowed to say those kinds of things now? Then you get people who say, well, it's because of the press publicised that. If we haven't publicised it, nobody would have known he said it. But that's the shining of the light in the bed of idiots. Yes. And that's the job that we do.
Now, allied to this is the famous spin-off. There's lots of spin-offs, and they're going to go on, and when we come out of it, eventually, what we're going to be left with, the airlines, as an example, are really suffering. Now, a lot of people don't realise, but if you take the individual country world economy, the airline industry on its own is equivalent to the 20th largest country. It's mega. It's trillions of dollars that are just going to be lost unless the governments come and back them up and keep them flying eventually. But it's got to come from somewhere, and you can be blooming sure, mate, it'll be you and me that pay for it.
Well, like you say, the global aviation sector has actually been one of the hardest hit industries in the world. You've got actually, I checked it out before, and 40 airlines have had to entirely ground their whole fleet. And that includes British Airways, Cathay Pacific. They've actually grounded 96% of their fleet. Now, 65.5 million jobs are supported by this 2.7 trillion industry. Now, there's two questions to me, really. They want to be supported by world governments. Why do organisations as big as this, why do they think governments have got to support them? if this industry is worth £2.7 trillion, why, like you and I, why didn't they put a few quid away for a rainy day? Why have they got to go to the governments? You know, but the governments are suffering as it is.
Indeed, BA certainly are quite well off. They can afford it. Maybe some of the short-haul budget airlines are in trouble. I'm sure our Irish friend from Ryanair has got plenty of brass.
Yeah, I'm sure he has. And maybe he is probably one of the people who would support his own business. Any business needs to be able to support itself. That's the main thing. And everybody's going to the government. A plumber's going to the government. I want me £1,000 a month. I want me £2,500 a month. The bloke who's got a chip shop says, well, I can't sell chips. I want £2,500 a month. I want £2,500 a month. I'm sure you do. Everybody goes to the government. Then all the billionaires, let's all go to the government and get money. Well, it's got to be paid for. It's all got to be paid back. You know, the most disgusting part of this is, as far as I'm concerned, what the banks have done. What the banks have done to people. If you go to the Leigh Banks Preservation Society, we've already started to touch on this. The banks, right, the lending rate has plummeted to its lowest in 100 years. Yeah. Yet the banks have put up the interest rates for borrowers, not for savers, for borrowers. Do you know why they've done it? Because they've had to give people a bit of a holiday, 3 months off from paying the mortgage or paying the loans if they want to. So they put the interest rates up. So when you've got to pay it in 3 months or whenever, you're going to be screwed.
Yeah, you've got interest rates there. They're trying to charge 7% as a mainstream bank. It is wicked when the interest rate is 0 or 0.1. The banksters are at it again. In fact, Leigh, frankly, I'd have thought you'd have had a change of your name by now.
Yeah, my name's been changed a lot. I'm keeping it as it is.
Well, listen, I'm going to move on now to, because we're both Manx, this will get you mad. I know it got me absolutely mad. Figures are coming out, even from the BBC, these figures actually, that last weekend, the police stopped 660 parties, including kids on bouncy castles, in the Manchester area alone. On top of that, there were 220 sports events behind closed doors, all very illegal. And we've got Daft Britain charging £60 if people sin. Now, everywhere else in Europe, you've just got to sneeze and you're €300. That's what you've got to pay. But I mean, that is so selfishly, isn't it? That is wicked.
It is, well, yeah, you know, it is one of the main aspects of what's happened in Britain because of coronavirus. We've been shown up to be, we basically, and Mancunians, I have to say, are some of the worst at this. We tend to think that we are invincible. You know, I'm invincible. I know that. I've got a Mancunian walk. I'll stride down the street with anybody. And there are words that only Mancunians use to express themselves. We don't have a great vocabulary. There are 2 words we use more than anything else. And that's what we say to society because we think we're clever. Well, we're not clever. It's absolutely ludicrous because I tell you what, when one of you gets coronavirus and you have to go into hospital, you're not going to be very happy. And then you think, here, things are really good. Here in Slovakia, things are really good.
They are. I've just seen the figures. They're about 2 people. That's all that have died.
Yeah, that's right. In Bratislava, it's quite a bit more, but it's still pretty good. And there are now talks about opening borders around us potentially next week. I'm not sure it will happen, but it's because generally people respect the rules. And that goes right back to communism, like we were talking right at the beginning, because people are used to being regimented here, and in Britain, you know, we're not used to being regimented at all. We're used to having what we see as freedom of the four-letter word.
Yes, bullshit is the word, I suppose, and we have that in common with the French, which is why a lot of the French don't get on with the English, and vice versa. But at least the French, the home of free speech, Leigh, we've got to congratulate them on that.
Oh yeah. Hopefully I'll be moving to France within the next year, because that's what the next place we want to go and investigate. Lots of stories there, lots of good things, lots of strange things going on. I like onions, and it's it's good.
I can see you with a handlebar full of onions on a bicycle with your flat Breton hat. I think it'll suit you.
What, a flattened Breton? Oh, I see. Hey, before we mention it, what about the coronavirus beard? Look,
it's doing very well. Yes. Well, I mean, I've got to say, at this juncture, you originally had a phone call, didn't you, from a member of the family out of Oz, and Oz has got a real problem. Tell us about that.
Well, it is. It's very strange indeed. Oz has put a moratorium on how much alcohol you can buy every day. Right, there is a limit to how much alcohol you can buy every day. My daughter, who it was absolutely mortified. I just, well, how much you're allowed to buy? This is the truth. I can't remember the exact figures now, but this is basically the truth. She said, well, you're allowed to buy a couple of bottles of wine, a crate of beer, and a bottle of spirits. I said, what, is that a week? She said, no, that's a day. I said, oh, is that between? She said, no, that's David being her chap. He can buy the same amount as well. So basically, they put a moratorium on how much you can have, and that means each couple can have 4 bottles of wine, 2 crates of beer, and 2 bottles of spirits. How much do Aussies drink?
Well, yes. Right. We're going to go to Radio 4 now. Yes, I mean, the Today programme, and it brings up all sorts of things. And on Monday of this week, my goodness me, did it find them out. Everybody's remote, of course, except one guy in the studio. And they tried for an hour to get everybody online and talk to them. Now, in a civilized country, that's no problem. You get the odd dropout. But every other call was bad. They gave up eventually. And the reason for that, of course, is British Telecom, who own the rail track. They own the lines. The government have known this, and we did a full investigative program on them many years ago when they denied that Openreach had anything to do with BT. And we uncovered that. And we said it's one and the same. No wonder nobody can come in and get decent broadband. And the government sorted it out, didn't they? 3 years ago. And said, oh, well, you can't get away with that, but they're still getting away with it. Leigh, it drives us round the bend. We've got the poorest broadband in the Western world, and now that dear old BBC is suffering. Nobody gets decent broadband. Here we are in Portugal, where we've got mega broadband, and even mega in Spain, in the mountains where we are. It's hopeless, and nothing gets done. It's a mafia.
But it's the gun they hold to your head to actually get broadband in the first place. I can't remember what we paid in Britain 2 years ago, but I think we were paying in the region of £48 a month for our broadband, and it wasn't very good. I remember we actually conversed on it quite often, and it wasn't very good. Yep. I'm sure it was 48 quid. Yep. But telling you about broadband, I'll tell you a true story here about Slovak broadband, which cost me €17, which is about £15.
Yeah.
Right? My broadband here isn't very good. The reason is that by the time we came to get all the sophisticated broadband, there was none of it left. So we had to have it pumped in through a wire, right? And this is what they told us. They said, I'm so sorry, we cannot do your broadband very well because there is a tree in between you and the mast.
Yeah. Did they have Indians in Slovakia then? That was a brilliant Indian.
That was my Nostrovia voice.
Was it?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness me. Well, that's the one thing that the dear OB got found out about in Radio 4. But later in the week, there was a better one than that, because rightly they were picking up on the problems in prisons, because they're having to lock down so many prisoners. It must be really awful. And they went to one prison and literally they couldn't slop out properly. And before the actual interview, the lady that was giving the interview, I forget who it was now, was saying, please don't listen to this if it upsets you. You know, we got the government health warning. And they were talking about having to, sorry if this is at mealtime, they were talking about having to use plastic bags for number ones and number twos. Now, come on. I mean, what does the listener need protecting about? That's life, isn't it?
Well, it is life, yeah, really. I think it's something we all get involved in at some stage. But yeah, it's the indignity of it, isn't it? It's the indignity of it. And, there are lots of, I've interviewed a lot of people who've been in prison, and it is a very undignified process. And there are a lot of the recidivists who create situations because they think it's funny. I don't think this is a case of somebody creating the situation, but surely, when you've got a lockdown on a whole building like that, you should be able to still get people in to make sure that things are working properly.
Indeed.
Yeah, there is dignity. There is dignity in many. There are certain criminals I don't think deserve to be treated in a dignified way, but that's the way I am. But generally, like we say, if it's an old lady who's not paid a telephone bill or whatever, treat people with respect until they've removed their own right from it. Yeah.
Well, they're letting people out of prison apparently that have committed minor misdemeanors now. That's got to be good, really. There's lots of people in prison that shouldn't be there. Lots of people that are not in prison that should be there. And that leads us on to the police. The police are in so much trouble in UK. It's not true. They're going completely OTT. They're getting hold of people. Get off that bicycle. Well, I don't understand that, but they're doing it. What's going on in England? Is it nanny state gone mad again?
I think we have a situation where there are, and these figures have escaped me again. There's about 100. I think, yeah, no, they've not escaped me entirely. There's about 120,000 police on the streets or available to a lot of crime in Britain. I think that includes all the pretend policemen, and they're under so much stress and so much pressure. That it is becoming a very difficult job. Policemen are also, because I know, obviously, because of a job, I know quite a lot of policemen. And it's not a clip round the ear and send you home to see your dad situation on the streets anymore. Police have to face people with knives, with guns, with all sorts of threat, people who don't respect the police, and really the police in Britain have had to adopt a tougher policy towards people who won't do what they're told to do. It's for survival. It's to keep the police safe. I don't respect police automatically. I know, having worked with them for so long, I know the kind of things that go on there. But in fact, the job of walking around the street and telling people to get off the street, get off that park bench, stand up and go home. When you look at some of the news in legitimate news sources in Britain, we had a policeman who was spat at. We've had a police officer who was abused by somebody who just ranted at him. No, they don't want to arrest you because it takes so much time and costs so much money. And he had to take this rant. Now, he was quite aggressive back towards this bloke. Good on him for that. And then the worst one of all, well, there's two. I've got two, actually. Two worst ones of all. And the police officer who went to stop a bloke who was kicking the door of a shop in because he wasn't being allowed in, because for whatever reason he wasn't being allowed in, and the cursing, the abuse, the threats that were made against him. And the final one, which isn't the police actually, but it's the ambulance service. They paramedics were in Stoke-on-Trent, Trent Vale I think it was, went to help somebody who got a health problem, and while they were in the house helping this person, mysteriously their ambulance burst into flames. It was 5 years old. It didn't have a problem. It wasn't a mechanical failure. You can draw your own conclusion on what happened there.
Yes, there's a consensual policing as we have in Britain. It's quite distinct from Spain, as an example. There are about 7 police forces if you add them all up. There's lots of policemen everywhere, and they have their own, especially the Guardia Civil. Now, I've got every respect for the Guardia Civil. We've had a number of things happen to us where the Guardia Civil have been very, very helpful. But frankly, they have their methods of policing, and that's with a baton. And if they come across hooligans, they hit them liberally on the back of the calf where you can't see the bruising, and it works. And one wonderful last year event happened. There's a town inland from the Costa del Sol, Alarenel Grande, and from there to the coast, Fuengirola, it's about 10 miles. And this clown got in the taxi and abused the taxi driver and messed up all his cab. So what did the police do? They took him back to the original place and said, right, you're going to walk back the 10 miles. Well, you'd never get there in Britain, but perhaps you should.
It's, I do remember a tale. This is a very good friend of mine, actually. Who could, like, in drink, could be a bit of a handful, going back a long time, so I'm not really telling tales out of school. But he got quite rumbustious in a public house near where he lived. And the police did exactly the same thing. They got him back of a police car, drove him back out probably 10 miles away, and said, right, walk home and sober up.
Yes, yes. Oh my goodness. Listen, I've saved the best to the last. You can have a good go at this one. Mr. Dr. Tedros, our Ethiopian friend, my goodness me, the stuff that's coming out there. He got put in charge of WHO. By the way, you can easily substitute WHO for the UN because they're all bound together. And there is in charge an Ethiopian communist, and he's being criticized roundly by Taiwan for a start, because they were kept out of the World Health Organization because of China. China, in effect, had the casting vote and put him in place. It is alleged, I will say twice, that everything was kept quiet in China the whole month, or a month and a half, October, November, when they could have told the world that this was happening and the virus was alive and well, and keep your heads down. They kept stum for a month and a half, and now many people in the US, particularly Donald Trump included, have said we've got to do something about this eventually.
Well, it is, yeah. The WHO, I actually thought they were a band for a long time, but the WHO has really made a mess of so many different aspects of what they should be looking after, and it is really a bad situation for them. Now, did they really keep coronavirus a secret? Is it because China, they're very close to China, but remember they're also very close to America, and are they really the sort of organisation that should it be disbanded now? It was brought in many years ago for one reason, and that in the 1950s, it was brought in to look after people. Now, is it doing that job anymore? I'm not so sure. But you also have to look at the fact that one of the organisations which has been attacking them is the Gatestone Institute in America. Far-right think tank, which has very regularly published anti-Muslim stuff on its site. Now, they've taken the WHO to task, and it just suddenly doesn't start to ring true. Why? What have WHO done wrong? Yeah, they've got the wrong person in charge potentially, and yet they're close to a lot of countries who at the moment are not looking very good.
No, indeed, they're not. Truth will come out as it always rises to the surface, Leigh. Where we're talking about the truth, let's not forget other nations. Breaking news, literally as we speak, are the figures from Spain. Now, don't be hypocritical, UK, because you're not including people in old people's homes in your figures either. And they're the ones that are going to build the figures up, some people think, by 20%. Not only is Spain doing the same thing, and is walking out, indeed, from some old people's homes, which is terrible, they're not even included in their figures those people who die at home. That is truly awful. So, you know, when we criticize China, I run the risk here, but I'm going to criticize Spain as well.
Is it the situation? I again, just by fortuosity, was talking to somebody who registers births, deaths and marriages earlier today, actually. And for fear of identifying this person, I'm not going to say where he or she is, although we don't know she's a she, that they say that they are registering, started registering COVID-caused deaths. And I asked them a straightforward question. I said, well, how do you know, without an inquest, that those deaths are being caused by the virus or through other causes? And the answer came quite straightforwardly, and this isn't disrespectful towards this person, who said, it's because the hospitals decide what they've died from.
Yes.
Now, you know, we have an inquest system here. So really, the deaths caused by the virus, it is supposition all the way through. You know, it's easy. Now, it's easy to say that that's what's caused it. And going back to old people in homes, how tragic, terrible. These people have paid for health care and health services all their lives. Then this comes along and floors them. But is this survival of the fittest? Is this what life is about? And the tragic, I'm not defending it. It's purely a discussion point. Is this survival of the fittest? And is it cruel? Is it cruel when these people have paid in for so long? They've still got life ahead of them. And it's, yeah, tragic. But who is to blame?
Well, certain noted journalists have followed that regime of saying, right, I've even seen birthday cards. I mean, it's black humor, of course. Now you've reached 60, you're not eligible for a ventilation machine. And, you know, at least some of us have got some certain amount of humor in these tragic circumstances. But, you know, Italy's been low for a long time. When you reach 79, you've had it. Don't even bother coming into hospital.
Well, here's a funny thing about that, and again, I have actually investigated this on occasions in the past, and actually experienced it, seen it happen on a couple of occasions. in England and Spain and Italy and probably most parts of the world, when you go into hospital, when you're very, very old, what's the chances of you coming out? When you go into a home, when you're very, very old, what's the chances of you actually coming out? Very, very, very small. Now, that ain't because of good health care. This is, you know, this is just the way things are. And bear in mind that these people also, if they're going home, are probably paying most of their inheritance for the children, or their children's inheritance, to be there for a few weeks.
Indeed.
Yeah.
£1,000 a week on average.
How much a week?
£1,000 a week on average.
And the rest in certain places. Yeah.
Average.
Yeah, it's we investigated this a few years ago. We pointed the finger at a couple of places and people, and nothing changed. Nothing changed. It was it was for the Daily Mirror were involved and other things, and it's a big money machine, and it's a big earner for the government. So very, very briefly, I'll tell you exactly what happened to one couple. And this was part of the story, we were doing. One of their parents was taken into a care home. She was very ill. She was in her early 90s. She was very ill. She was taken into a care home. And within 20 minutes of this woman going into a care home, the authorities, the social workers, had phoned one of the children and told them that they needed to put the mother's house on the market immediately to pay the fees. Then they tried to get the children to pay the fees, and then they contacted the brother who lived elsewhere in the world and said he'd have to pay the fees. As it turned out, nobody had to pay the fees because this woman was so ill.
Yeah, awful, awful. Leigh, time has gone, as it usually does, too rapidly. We hope that we've cheered everybody up today.
Yeah, of course we have. Yeah, bit of a rant, bit of a talking about dying and getting diseases.
Well, all being well, we should be back next week and we'll genuinely cheer you up. Thank you so much, Leigh.
Yeah. Okay, good.